competition. Stop competing with each other, thereby driving up quality and driving down price. Instead, they all secretly agree to all raise their prices together and keep them similar, which...
But for the benefit, for your benefit, let me say the following.
Aina lilibit, kotongwani kadni katiba tsaye karingu ya diperek, atai anywhere.
Le banka di manipulator renta as a result of the manipulation of the rent. A lot of our brothers and sisters.
2023, South Africa's Competitions Tribunal added 9 more banks to a list of 19 local and international banks that included like Credit Suisse and Barclays and Bank of America. And the accusation was that these 28 banks had colluded between 2007 and 2013 to manipulate the rand for their own profit. Trying to manipulate the market for foreign exchange is a massive deal. This is basically how it works. Whenever you want to do business with somebody in another country who uses a different currency to your country, you both need to find a common currency to do the buying and selling, the trading in. And generally, people trade in dollars. So if you are a South African wanting to do business with somebody overseas, even if they're not in America, you generally have to go and take the rands that you have and buy dollars. And banks play a massive role in how most people buy foreign currency. They often have their own foreign currency that they trade on their own behalf, but they often create channels through which everyday South African or businessmen around the world can do easy foreign exchange purchase and trade. And through these processes, they make profit, they make commission. And in our fundamentally globally interconnected world where virtually all goods and services and industries are involved in international trade, the foreign exchange market for currencies to do deals in has a massive effect on a ton of industries. It's obviously imports and exports, but it's a ton of other things, including direct foreign investment, public and private debt, financial assets, and the price of many goods and services. So what's collusion and how does colluding generally work? Well, ideally in capitalism, the way that prices are regulated is that a bunch of companies are competing to provide you a good, a product, a service. And they try to compete to get your business instead of you going somewhere else in 2 ways. The first way is they increase quality. So they say our stuff is literally better than the other stuff. And the second way they do that is they drop price. So that's how it's supposed to work. But unfortunately, sometimes companies that are all providing the same product, and I'm going to use bread in this example, say all the bakeries in a country that are providing all the bread for the entire population, stop competing with each other, thereby driving up quality and driving down price. Instead, they all secretly agree to all raise their prices together and keep them similar, which means that none of them is out competing each other on price. But what that means is if you want to buy bread, you have to buy from one of these bread makers and all of them have raised their price. And so you have to swallow the price that they're selling the bread at, which means that all of these colluding companies make more money. And it screws the consumer. So in the vast majority of countries in the world, there are laws in place against collusion because they don't want people to get screwed over by creators of goods and services who then dominate the market so that nobody else can get in and then all agree to raise the prices. That is literally what South Africa's Competitions Commission and Competitions Tribunal is for. So let's apply this to the market for foreign exchange. There are all of these different banks, 28 banks, trying to convince you, a South African business person who wants to do business with somebody overseas, to go and buy foreign exchange through their channel that they have created for you. And if they're all competing with each other, then they're going to try to undercut each other and attract your business by offering lower rates. But then that means that even if they get your business, they're making less money, less commission per transaction. But what if all the banks secretly got together and agreed that they would all raise their prices for doing foreign exchange? So then you, as the business person, don't have a cheaper bank to go to. No matter what bank you go to, it's going to be expensive because they've fixed the value, manipulated the value of the rand away from the competitive market so that they get bigger commissions, bigger personal profits. That's what the Competitions Commission is accusing these banks of doing. So the banks made it harder and more expensive to do business with South Africa and South Africans. They made it harder and more expensive for South Africans to do business with other businesses around the world, other governments, other countries. And that naturally had a negative effect on South Africans' lives, our economy, because it was more expensive to do business. It was more expensive to import and export goods. It was more expensive to get the kinds of goods and services that make South Africans' lives better into South Africa, because they had spent more of their budget on doing the forex, the foreign exchange. So the banks colluded to take money off of all parts of the South African business world and the South African economy. That's what they did, and we all suffered. And the Competitions Commission claims that they have evidence of the banks actively colluding. They say that they have primary evidence, that means the literal original evidence, of 158 chats between all 28 banks over a 7-year period. So that's not the only way to manipulate the value of a currency. There are other ways. Say, for example, there are massive companies. Let's say, for example, a mining company that needs to do international trade and so needs to buy an enormous amount of foreign currency, usually dollars. So what they usually would do is go to all the banks and find the one that gives them the best rate, the lowest added cost, and therefore the lowest commission for the bank, for the massive business of a whole mine and all of its product, getting their foreign exchange through this bank. That is how capitalism is supposed to make competition to drive that price down. But if all the banks are secretly colluding, then they can strike agreements where they pass around customers for all of their own benefit to guarantee that they all have work. Let's take this mining company example. So what could potentially have happened is that maybe the mining company comes along and all the banks in secret go, cool, this mining company needs work through one of us. It's your turn. And that bank will drop its rate of work a little bit, its cost, its price, and all the other banks will keep theirs a little higher, which basically pushes the mining company in this case, or any business, into working with that bank. And then for the next client, it'll be a different one. And that allows them to maintain higher prices while they all continue to get work. And the smallest price change can make an enormous difference to these massive companies who are trading at huge scale. In fact, it's estimated that even a 1 cent difference in an inflated bank currency trade can cost a mining house or similar sized company thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of US dollars over time. And obviously, because massive companies like mining houses were spending way more to just do the business that they were doing, that took away budget from all the other stuff that they could be doing that once again could have been contributing to South Africa's economy and our nation's prosperity. So, where are we now? A bunch of banks are testifying before the Competitions Commission and Tribunal. A couple of banks have already paid fines. Standard Chartered Bank paid an over 40 million rand fine for what they did. But the way that these banks are treating the South African authorities looks really ugly. Standard Chartered Bank itself paid the US authorities over 530 million rand in fines in 2019. And they've been quibbling and bartering to pay only just 42 million rand to the South African authorities this year. And the evidence is damning. Advocate for the state Tembeka Nxokai-Tobi, when speaking to Judge Dennis Davis, who was presiding over these proceedings of the Competitions Commission, said that there just was a chat room, and the purpose of the chat room was to strike deals and negotiate terms on all these banks manipulating the market, manipulating the rand. They just did it. Fortunately now, Standard Chartered is going to be a witness in the prosecution's case as the commission goes after the other banks and tries to really understand how much money was taken, how much the rand was manipulated, and what the economic fallout for the country has been. So how much has this affected the South African rand and the economy? Well, it definitely has had an effect. It's too soon yet to say how much of an effect. But one thing that is definitely true is that while the banks were manipulating the rand and negatively affecting trade between South Africa and South African business, the negative effects were being felt by everyday South Africans. And those banks that were making these illegal, horrible, horrifying profits were doing so while repossessing South Africans' homes, repossessing their cars, leaving them mired in crippling debt. One thing that must be cleared up though, and it's been spreading like wildfire, and it's just wrong. Many South Africans have seen and come to believe that these banks, the whole cartel together, were making like R1 trillion a day between 2007 and 2013. There's been a lot of confusing media press about this, a lot of confusing quotes from authority figures, but I just need to tell you, there is no way that these banks were making R1 trillion a day. Here's some context. R1 trillion a day would have meant 365 trillion rand a year that these cartels, these 28 banks were making, just off of messing with the South African rand's value for their own gain. To take a year from the period when the banks were manipulating the rand, 2007, let's say that they were making R1 trillion a day. That's 365 trillion rand a year. And it was about 8 rand to the dollar in 2007. So 365 trillion rand a year divided by 8 is around 45 trillion US dollars. That is how much this cartel would have been making a year if they were really making R1 trillion a day. 45 trillion US dollars. But the entire gross domestic product for the whole world in 2007 was 59 trillion US dollars. So when combining everything that everybody in the whole world made in 2007, it was around 60 trillion US dollars. There is no way in the world, it is impossible that 28 banks colluding to manipulate one relatively minor weak currency in the world were making 45 trillion US dollars. There is no way that 28 banks could account for 3/4 of all of the money being made in 2007.
Competition Commission is busy with an inquiry on rent manipulation. The question should correctly be directed at the Competition Commission and not the Reserve Bank. But for the benefit, for your benefit, let me say the following.
Oh, he's thinking.
In 2001, South Africans believed that some chaps are sitting somewhere conspiring against us to weaken the rand. These chaps were conspiring somewhere to weaken the rand. And in 2002, we launched a commission of inquiry into the rapid depreciation of the rand. You can Google it, you'll find it on the website of the Department of Justice. It's a thick report, otherwise known as the Mybeck report. Before the commission could come to an end, a bank approached the Reserve Bank with an offer of a settlement. And the settlement was that the transactions they entered into will be unwound and the profits they had made would be forfeited. The difference between that inquiry and the inquiry of the Competition Commission is that that inquiry dealt with breaches of exchange control regulations. That is why the Reserve Bank was involved, because it was breaches of exchange control regulations. For completeness, in 2009-10, the rand was appreciating. South Africans believed that somebody is conspiring against us to make the rand so strong and make the life of South African exporters a living hell. No commission of inquiry was called then. In 2000
No commission of inquiry was called then, which in my thinking, and I'm trying to get in his mind, maybe he's also saying it could have been there. That means it could have been established. That's the story of South Africa, right? We wait until something goes boom. We wait until something explodes. And then people, they start to wake up. When people have eaten, when people have taken money, when people have done, then we wake up. South Africa sometimes.
15. We picked up globally that there were reports of market abuse by institutions in various markets. For your benefit, if you remember, in the UK there was the LIBOR manipulation issue. And there were concerns also in the foreign exchange markets. We decided that we are going to start making inquiries. And we asked the former senior deputy governor of the Reserve Bank, Mr. James Cross, to lead a process to establish whether there were any abuses. That report is available on the South African Reserve Bank website. Amongst its key recommendations was that we must develop a code for the foreign exchange market in South Africa. As we were trying to develop that code, we established that the BIS was working on a global code. South Africa joined that process of developing the global code. And we didn't just say that we have adopted the code, we actually pledged our commitment to the code. That pledge is on the website of the South African Reserve Bank. We are not the only ones. Many other central banks around the world have done a pledge of a similar nature. Whilst we were busy with that inquiry, the Competitions Commission approached us and said to us that they have picked up news from some foreign authorities that amongst the global manipulation of, alleged manipulation of exchange rates, is also a rand-dollar pair. And based on that, they are embarking on a process of inquiry. They approached us and asked us for assistance because we are in the foreign exchange market. We spent hours and hours with them. We provided them with all the assistance they require. Should they require any further assistance from us, they will get it. But they are the competent authority to investigate any allegations of market abuse or market manipulation. They must be given the space to do their work and follow their processes, and we should not be burdening them with asking for running commentary. They are the competent authority on these matters. That's all I could assist you with. Beyond that, you are not going to get any other comment from the South.
Manipulated. It cannot just be business as usual. And I want to tell you, we had a discussion at our level in terms of the ANC. We have said to our government, deal with this matter and give us what you are going to do to deal with it. You know, comrades, Competition Commission tell us that there was manipulation of the rand. And then some of the banks confessed to that. In 2010, when we were doing infrastructure programs here, there was collusion by construction companies. They were fined. It's business as usual. They are still in business. Still today. Those companies who colluded, they paid a fine, they are still in business. Companies are fined by Competition Commission, it is rumored, 42 million. And then for trillions that they gained in return for the manipulation of the rand. First, we need to explain, how did this happen? And what steps is our government? Let's leave everybody else. It cannot be that there is a reportage of the rand manipulation and government is reporting like an NGO.
That's true.
No. The private sector is sabotaging. Kutlule spokesperson of government and Chaveni, comrade, I respect. Government is being sabotaged. And then Ronaldo ring really ANC. What are we going to say? What is Sanko going to say? And we must never be quiet about this. We must. But before we do all those things, we want the president to lead from the front and tell us that happened to our markets and the manipulation of the rand. What are we doing? How did it happen and what are we doing? If we don't know, then we must investigate. You know, comrades, it was said here we are giving arms to Russia. President
Wait. So, if the rand is manipulated, right, or there is a collusion on the rand and everything, right, that will mean when people look at South Africa, they will look at South Africa as a place where maybe, for example, they will not be able to take their business there, and when they trade, there's a problem because it's expensive, blah 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 blah. The president of that time, listen to me, politically, the president of that time, other political parties, when they look at him, they look at him as a person who is making all these things actually to happen. That means the rand is performing badly under a president of so and so and so and so. That means they take that problem and put it in his face and say, we under your presidency, the rand was this. But we forget that there are other things that were happening in the background, which were manipulating everything. No wonder some political parties, they ended up coming and saying, if these 2 or 3 parties come together, the rand will collapse. It makes sense now. I'm very sorry, but if you're a president at a time, that means people, they will look at you bad because they will say, hey, the rand is performing bad because of this president. But there are people who are doing their things on the background. And when it's found out, it's no longer about, it was not his fault. You know, I'm just saying.
and took a very decisive step and appointed a judge to investigate that. Just because America was lying, and we knew they are lying. Today, we are very clear that there are no weapons we supply to Russia. The report came clean. There is no such a thing. Americans can never come back about that. Tomorrow we'll be asked, why are we quiet about the manipulation of the rand? Now we are going to be feeding to these conspiracies that are going around. It happened because sabotage was banned. It happened because there was a political agenda.
You see, that's what I'm thinking, though.
And then that is what has actually happened. So we must respond to that.
That's the thing, guys.
Are we not supposed to, comrades?
We're supposed to.
And we can't respond like we are helpless and we are not in charge and we are not in government. We must respond decisively. We as the ANC, we have said this is criminal and it must be followed in a criminal way. It can't but end there. What is government saying? I've seen Treasury statement is issued National Treasury. And then, ki National Treasury, aina lilibit. Kotongo ni katiba tsaye karingu ya dipereng. Ahlai anywhere. Intle kwa katiba ya hae ki ngwanesu ki abtia kamar. Hakiso mona ahlama le anyana. Untsua statement e karikili nyalo. What's a statement? Utwi rent was manipulated. I've never seen a minister of finance with his beautiful head explaining to the Republic what is this thing. There is a statement issued by National Treasury.
I remember
And
he was quiet at that time, I think.
we are leaderless.
Yeah, he was.
Give me
very quiet.
kupai.
I remember there was
What
a
you
time.
know, we are leaderless. Haluki seminati inokotongwa nakatalu se ranta ye kayo. Because that's the only person who can explain, not through a statement. Now, as the ANC, that's what we want, as the ruling party, that this matter, government, we have deferred to them to deal with it and announce the steps they are going to take. I can assure you, comrades, we've got our last National Executive Committee for the year, from the 17th to the 20th of December. By the time we finish by the 20th, we must equally give you an answer. And we're going to ask them to explain to us what are they doing about this manipulation. It's not just going to disappear. Aitlunyamela fela ibe ufedile Ranta ini manipulatiwa jwang ha re tsebe ho fedile. It's not going to happen like that.
Le banka di manipulator renta. As a result of the manipulation of the rent, a lot of our brothers and sisters who were climbing the ladder into the middle class have lost their houses, have lost their cars, have lost every little thing they got through loans because of the manipulation of the rent. Mara batho ba utswangi chelete through manipulation of the rent aba tshwariwi ebile a re ba tsebe. If Bakari Godrich Gadi got a tender of 2 million in Polokwane, Bailo Muncha, his face, the face of his wife, the face of his mother and grandchildren, we will know everything about the stolen tender of 2 million because he's a black person. But these ones who have manipulated the rent and stole trillions and trillions, they've got no faces. One of the banks have manipulated the rent.
That is true.
But who is behind those banks? What are the faces of these people? Where do they stay? They don't tell us because it's white people. It's white people who manipulated the rent. And therefore white people can do anything they want to do and get away with it.